and welcome to another episode of Consensus with Canonizer. We've had a few breaks here, but we are back with a vengeance. And we've got assembled the mighty Canonizer Council. We have Brent Alsop. Brent, how are you?
Good.
Kelly Cassidy, how are you?
I am feeling particularly mighty today.
Mighty! That's what I wanted to hear. And of course, we have our mysterious non-expert who will provide his non-expertise as we go forward. How are you?
Every day, not an expert.
Very nice to hear. Very good. So talking about this, one of the things that has been brewing out there for a little while here is Texas has been redistricting its congressional districts in ways that are designed to solidify Republican control of the House of Representatives. And California has responded by trying to do the same, only in reverse, to redistrict California in a way that would create more Democratic districts and thereby turn control of the House of Representatives over to the Democrats. The current majority is, I think, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the slimmest majority in history. Isn't it like one vote or two votes?
I believe you're correct. I think it's 5, but there's been a couple of deaths and so I'm not sure where it stands right now, but it is slim, and I think it's historic. The exact number I'd have to look up.
Well, you've created a topic, a Canonizer topic that addresses this. Bring that here to the stage. Can you tell us a little bit about this topic?
Yes, I can. Let me get there. If you go to the Canonizer homepage, you'll see the fabulous scroll of some of our most recent fun episodes. And this is right there with the representation of a salamander. Click on that and it takes you to the topic.
That looks more like the Geico gecko.
Well, to be honest, I used AI and I don't really know what a salamander looks like. I assume it's more slimy, but for purposes of this, that's a salamander. And we're going to call him Jerry the salamander.
The salamander.
And so Jerry the salamander is here because it's about redistricting. So for people who might not be aware, the United States Constitution requires an annual, every 10 year, decennial, however you say that. Every 10 years, we get a new census. And after that, there is always a, well, not always, but at that point, historically, there is a redistricting in states as they either gain or lose seats in the House of Representatives. Then they also use that to do the same thing for their House and Senate seats in their state legislature. Each of the 50 states is given pretty wide latitude by the Supreme Court in how they do that, but they have done, the Supreme Court has weighed in on a couple of cases. A couple of the important ones to remember are that they have to represent the same number of people. There was an issue in Ohio where they didn't really change some districts for a while. So as people, or this was in Illinois, sorry, and as people moved into Chicago and left the rural areas, they never changed their representation to give more representation to Chicago. They kept it in the more conservative, Republican-leaning parts, and the Supreme Court said no. Each person is entitled to one vote, and that means also one vote in the House of Representatives. There was a case also clarified that you couldn't gerrymander based on race. That was Gomillion versus Lightfoot, and it determined that the 15th Amendment meant that you couldn't draw congressional boundaries based on race, which is kind of interesting because right now there's another case before the Supreme Court where some white people have complained that the district that they were put in is predominantly black, so it means that it's reverse racism, and the Supreme Court is set to hear that. But why it's in the news right now is Texas, as Jim said, decided to redistrict, and then California responded, and now there's other states that are threatening to or not threatening to. An interesting side note is Ohio, who went through 7 redistrictings in the space of 10 years, a century ago, now is mandated, I think it's in their state constitution, where they have to redistrict mid-census. So this is that year, 2026, and they'll do it again in 2036. 37 states have redistricting that is left to their state legislators, and the rest have nonpartisan redistricting commissions, which is interesting because those of us who live in Utah know that the Utah Supreme Court or Utah District Court held that the Utah legislature erred in rejecting the independent redistricting commission's maps, and they have to go back and redo it. Similar thing is going on in New York right now. They have an independent redistricting commission, but their Democrat-controlled legislature rejected their findings and made their own maps. So this is politics 101, and happens every 10 years, and sometimes much more frequently. The 2030 census is coming up, and it's expected that there's going to be a lot of changes. A lot of Democratic stronghold states are going to lose significant seats, and more conservative states, led by Texas and Florida, are expected to pick up seats. Utah expected to pick up a 5th seat. The New York Times had an interesting article last Tuesday that the headline was, "After the 2030 census, can Democrats ever win the presidency again?" So that's a quick overview. There are 2 camps on here. One of them is to the winner goes the spoils. Elections have consequences. Redistrict away. And the other one is no more gerrymandering. Stop it now.
Yeah.
So where would you like to start?
Well, which camp do you support?
I feel pretty strongly that no matter how much you try and get politics out of politics, it's not going to work. And whether it's Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent, I think that they should be the ones who are redrawing, making sure that everybody is equally represented, in that one person is entitled to 1 vote.
Brent, you were cheering with the no more gerrymandering. Stop it now.
Yeah, I remember my junior high school civics class, or civics, U.S. history or something, taught me how bad gerrymandering was, and I can't believe that we're having this conversation that everyone gerrymanders away. But anyway, yeah, I haven't joined it yet. No more gerrymandering. Stop it now, because I want to listen to more of Kelly's arguments and understand that. But we'll see if I change. I plan on joining one or the other. In I'm still leaning in no more gerrymandering. Stop it now. So that's one I would. That's the way I'm feeling now. But we'll see if I change my mind over this.
Nice.
How about you, not an expert?
I do not know. I am sorry.
You are genuinely not an expert at all.
I am so far removed from expertise on this. It's not even funny, but I can pretend to be.
I'm going to do my best to persuade you to the dark side.
Yeah.
Well,
how about you, Jim?
I'm trying to see how to split the difference on this, because I think there's no question that getting politics out of politics is impossible, and that redistricting is something that partisans have done since the beginning of time, or at least the beginning of elections. and it's something that will continue. And at the same time, I'm thinking about what happened here in the state of Utah. In Utah, there was a ballot initiative that called for an independent redistricting commission that would create congressional districts solely on the basis of population, not on the basis of partisan concentrations. And it passed overwhelmingly, Proposition 4. And the legislature took it and said, oh, well, that's very nice. We're not going to pay any attention to this. Thank you for your suggestions. We're just going to gerrymander however we want to gerrymander and forget it. And that was that. And in fact, a lot of ballot initiatives in Utah met a similar fate. There was a ballot initiative that legalized cannabis that the legislature said thanks, but no thanks. There was a ballot initiative that involved Medicare or Medicaid, I'm sorry, that the legislature pretty much just ignored. And it became very discouraging to a lot of activists in the state of Utah because getting something on the ballot is very difficult. Passing a ballot initiative is very difficult. The threshold for doing all that is just extraordinarily difficult and expensive and time consuming. And yet, even when you are able to accomplish all of that and get something passed, the legislature can just ignore it, which is what the Utah legislature has done. However, recently, the Utah Supreme Court took up a court challenge and determined that the legislature was out of line and needs to honor Proposition 4 and create that independent redistricting commission. And so the legislature then said, okay, we're going to put something on the ballot that would allow us to be able to throw out Proposition 4. And they put something on the ballot, and their description of it was so dishonest and so misleading that the Utah Supreme Court weighed in again and said, this ballot initiative is null and void because you're not telling the people what they do, what it does. Yep. The description talked about how this will enhance voting rights. And this will, I mean, if you read it without knowing anything about it, you would think it was written by the Proposition 4 people about Proposition 4, that it was for independent redistricting, when in fact it would say that it would give all redistricting power, reserve it for the legislature, regardless of the ballot initiative. So that's a very long bit of context to say that no, you can't take politics out of politics. But the Proposition 4 people used politics to get what they wanted, which was, we want in Utah independent congressional districts based on population, not partisan makeup. And the legislature said no. And so I think we're kind of in an uncharted territory because I don't know what the enforcement mechanism is of the Supreme Court decision. Presumably, we're going to get recommendations and maybe even actual nonpartisan redistricting as a result of this, but that doesn't seem to have happened yet. Kelly, do you know when that's going to happen? Do you know?
Yeah, the Utah judge, first off, the state legislature asked for more time, and the judge said no, and so they have to have everything scored away by October. Oh, okay. So it's really being fast tracked. So the legislature is working on that, but simultaneously they're going to take it again to the state Supreme Court, and then they'll take it to this U.S. Supreme Court. I think the Supreme Court would side with the state law on this. So, and it's funny to me. I've looked at the
Utah Supreme Court or the U.S.
the U.S. Supreme Court. I think they will let this go. They will agree with the local courts because it's based on state law, state constitution that doesn't violate the federal constitution. But anybody that tries to protect the Supreme Court is always wrong. But I was looking at the maps that the Redistricting Commission suggested, and one of the 4 they suggested is pretty close to what we have now anyway. And so I don't know why they just didn't accept that. It's kind of interesting, like you say, it's on by population, which it has to be by the Supreme Court rulings. And there's about 761,000 people in a congressional district, except in Alaska and Wyoming and Rhode Island. All right, no, Rhode Island might have 2. They have 1. They're going to lose 1, but it's how you draw the lines to get that population is where the challenge always ends up. Like, how do you draw those lines in Utah? You can't just do a city and say it's 761,000 people, because we don't have a city of 761,000 people. You can't do it by county. Salt Lake County has more than that.
Yeah.
So, like, where do you put the line? And that's the political part of this that I don't know you can get rid of. And the redistricting committee, or the commission, by Utah statute, there's going to be 5 Republicans and 4 Democrats. So it's going to be what the Republicans want anyway. I mean, they've written it so that it makes it look more nonpartisan than that. But the governor gets to appoint somebody, the state Senate gets to appoint somebody, the state House of Representatives gets to appoint somebody, and then the leader of the minority leader of the House and Senate, and then there's the others are at large based on their party preference.
Well, yeah, again, so what I think the Democrats in Utah want is a map where Salt Lake City particularly is essentially its own congressional district, because that is overwhelmingly Democratic and it's the only part of the state that is.
Yeah.
And what the legislature has done for many years is divide up Salt Lake City and put pieces of it into all of the 4 different congressional districts, and in order to dilute the Democratic influence and make sure that all 4 are represented by Republicans. For many years,
gerrymandering move, yeah.
I mean, that's how it's worked here. For many years, Jim Matheson, who was a fairly conservative Democrat, my father at one point said, "Why don't you just become a Republican?" And he said, "Well, it's because it would kill my mother." That's how he described it. I mean, he comes from a long line of Democrats in Utah, well-respected Democrats. His father was a well-respected Democratic governor of Utah for many years. So we would have 1 Democrat and the rest Republicans, because the district that had most of Salt Lake City in it would invariably elect a Democrat. And Ben McAdams was the last Democrat that was elected from the state of Utah. And he was defeated by a very conservative Republican, Burgess Owens. And I don't think there is any foothold that the Democrats have in winning a congressional seat based on the makeup of these 4 districts as they currently exist.
Yeah.
So it then becomes, okay, well, who gets to decide what's gerrymandering and what isn't? I mean, in the age of AI, I think not an expert. You said you wanted AI to govern. Was that before the podcast began? Or did you say?
I mean, I said that kind of as a tongue-in-cheek joke. I mean, the reality is that, I mean, if we're going to talk about stupid ideas or just really far out there ideas, I mean, the ideas of congressional districts as they stand today, we don't really need them as they're written in the Constitution. They don't serve the same purposes as they used to. But in order to change what we're doing right now, we would have to change the Constitution of the United States, which is a very large ask.
Why would you have to change the Constitution?
Congressional districts are part of the U.S. Constitution. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Well, but in what way that's different from I may be misunderstanding you. I got the sense that
So the fundamental idea of congressional districts is that you have groups of people who have a common identity and geography and typically vote the same because they have the same issues. They want the same representation in Congress. The reality is that our population is much larger. We have huge advancements of communication technology. Communities are different. Major metropolitan areas are all sprawling into each other. We live in a different world now, where in the past, when the Constitution was written, this idea of gerrymandering didn't really even make sense, because how would you draw a border around people that could accomplish this partisan objective when people either were very spread out in rural communities or slightly less spread out in small cities? Like, we just live in a different world, and the idea that congressional districts just the idea that one person can really serve their constituents in that manner doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to jump over you, because you're correct. George Washington wanted it written in the Constitution that a U.S. congressional district would be no more than 30,000 people, but that wasn't written in, and so and at some point they decided that we're just going to stop this at 435, because if it gets any bigger, it's going to be unmanageable. Like, we'd be looking at a House of Representatives right now that would have 5,000-6,000 people in it if we had George Washington's will. And one thing that you're saying, Jim, about and also to Brent, if we were to put Salt Lake City and make it its own congressional district, that's cool, but we'd still have to put another 500,000 people in it. So do we cut up other cities to fit in there? Do we go up into and take Republicans in Bountiful and West Bountiful and North Salt Lake and say that they're no longer represented by the party of their choice? So, like, it's a really messy thing, and there is not an easy answer. And again, I just don't see how you can unpoliticize politics.
no, I mean, I hear you, and I think you're right. I mean, it reminds me very much of debates over campaign finance. You know, prior to Watergate, there were absolutely no campaign finance laws whatsoever. John F. Kennedy was elected. My father said this, but I've never been able to find independent verification of this. But my father said that John F. Kennedy was essentially elected on the basis of about 6 campaign donors. 6 rich guys gave him enough money to run for president. And Watergate changed all of that, and everybody was worried about the corrupting influence of money in politics. And so we passed all these campaign finance laws that somehow magically have not eliminated corruption or financial corruption from our politics.
Yep.
And what happens is that, okay, you put up this sort of barrier for the money to come in one way, and so the money finds a way to come in some other way. And the result is you have now Supreme Court decision has now, the Citizens United decision means that people can donate money to independent groups and not disclose how much or to whom they are donating, and groups can act in ways that they have absolutely no accountability for what they say. You know, just on and on and on and on. All attempts to get money out of politics have just, if anything, increased the influence of money in politics. And my father's reaction when he was a United States Senator was saying that the best campaign finance would be no limits and complete transparency.
Yep.
You know, so if somebody wants to give Donald Trump $1 billion to run for president, that person is labeled as such, and everybody can see where the possible conflict of interest is. But they make their decision based on that.
Yeah.
And you know, in the era of Trump, when he's created his own cryptocurrency and foreign governments are just buying up Trump coin in order to impress and to get a seat at the table at a White House dinner. It just becomes ridiculous to say, okay, how do you put a stop to that? How do you end that? How? I don't know. I think you just shine a light on it and say this is corrupt, and then let the voters decide. So,
and you're pointing at another constitutional principle that America's founded on: free speech. Like, should a rich person's speech be less important than a poor person or somebody who you disagree with? They should have their words silenced because, like, so like there's all sorts of sub issues to this too.
yeah,
Can I share one observation? I was doing some calculations based on Republican legislatures and Democrat legislatures. Georgia has Republican, I think, governor and House and Senate, and they should have 7 Democrats in their representing their congressional seats. They have 5, so there's -2. Florida should have 12 Democrats. They have 8. If you took it by the last presidential election, Texas should have 16 Democrats. They have 13. New York should have 11 Republicans. They have 7. California should have 20 House members. In California, they have 9. Illinois should have 7 Republicans. They have 3. So it's it's not an issue of just Texas. It's happened before, and not just Texas. In 2016, a bunch of states decided they were going to have redistricting votes mid-cycle. North Carolina, Virginia, Florida, Pennsylvania threw out their maps and got a new one. So
yeah. So
like in Utah, I want the voice of the voters to be what happens. But it also, does that put us at a disadvantage because everybody else is doing it the other way, including states with nonpartisan redistricting commissions. They do what they want. The legislature overturns it if they feel like it.
well, you're making it very hard for me not to join the "to the winner go the spoils, elections have consequences, redistrict away" camp. I keep trying to find reasons why that's not representative of my position, but the reality is I just don't know. I mean, in an ideal world, a lot of things wouldn't happen that happen, but
Yeah.
I
Yep.
don't. I mean, because as you point out, the Independent Redistricting Commission in Utah is going to be run by Republicans anyway. How is that going to be any less partisan? I don't know. I mean, there isn't an objective observer that doesn't have a dog in this fight.
Yeah.
Even if they say that they're an objective observer who doesn't have a dog in this fight, that's just not true. I mean, we're
Yeah.
all in this together. This is everybody's government, and the idea that we're going to find some way that it's going to be run solely by altruistic principles and not by partisan sorts of motivations is just, I think, a little silly.
Yeah. And let me throw out one other parting thought. Like, how do you decide what the boundaries are? Like a city boundary, in Utah doesn't meet that. You can't have there's no city with 761,000 people in it. Do you do it based on religious lines? There's X number of Catholics here, so let's include them with the Jewish population. Or do we do it by where the fault lines are? Do we do it based on where the racial line, where we can't do the racial lines because the Supreme Court has said so? Like, there isn't a boundary that works other than somebody just arbitrarily taking a pen and going.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Brent, not an expert. Have you changed your positions at all as a result of this discussion?
No, yeah, I'm still in the no gerrymandering. It really bothers me what Texas and California are doing, threatening to, and if that contagion spread through the whole nation, it just seems like a big mess to me. So, do you like that? What's going on with California, and do you think that's a good thing?
No, I don't. But I
No,
also
I don't
know,
either.
I don't know what the alternative is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a who watches the watchers sort of situation.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something in Texas's defense right now. I don't like what they're doing, but they have done it before. Other states have done it before. But to single them out, they've had an influx of probably 400,000 people. They probably have districts, whole new districts that are going to be created. So who's going to represent them now? Like, do we like it's not going to be fair either way. I don't see any way to make it fair, but I'm going to go ahead and join to the winner goes the spoils.
Now, not an expert, since you're not an expert, and so you're kind of coming at this without any sort of background. Have we convinced you one way or the other? Or are you still?
I'm leaning towards joining the no gerrymandering camp.
All right, and why?
Well, the discussion has been insightful, but I mean the reality is that just as a citizen, gerrymandering still seems weaponized politically, and I would like anything that can be done to prevent or minimize that to be done.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
could find something.
Can I make one final argument here?
Sure.
And you can agree with it or not, but we have in the United States, I believe, the most respected body who's supposed to be nonpartisan, who's supposed to make altruistic decisions based on the law, and it's called the U.S. Supreme Court. And how many of their decisions that aren't unanimous have made somebody say, that's the most corrupt system I've ever heard. They're obviously evil. They're being taken advantage of. Like, again, something that's supposed to be, by the Constitution, one step removed from politics, can't be non-political.
There you go. All right. Well, so I don't know that we have convinced or persuaded anybody to jump camps. Although maybe, Kelly, you persuaded me to. I was initially trying to figure out a camp that might split the difference between the two, but I think I'm going to end up joining to the winner go the spoils.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I would love to have an altruistic system, and like aspirationally, that's great. I just don't think realistically that's going to happen in my lifetime, my kids' lifetimes. We've got to wait till the Star Trek universe is here and everybody lives in peace and happiness.
That's 5 years from now.
5 years. All right. Sounds good to me.
It's near, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate your input here. Those of you watching, please go and weigh in yourself. Join one of these camps if it best represents your point of view. If not, create a camp of your own, and we will go forward from there. So until next time, we will see you on Consensus with Canonizer. Thanks, everybody.
Peace out.
Thank you.